Well, hello everyone. Welcome to the University of California Botanical Garden at Berkeley. I'm Christine Manu. I'm Director of Education and Visitor Engagement here at the Garden, and we are so pleased to have you join us today virtually for our special lunchtime talk today. We are joined by James Fong, who is our presenter today. He is a horticulturalist for the garden who's been here for 7 years, working in the Australasian collection as well as in the Asia collection. And he is not just a gardener, he is actually a museum scientist here at the garden. Those of you who might be unfamiliar with the UC Botanical Garden, we are a living museum of plants. We are 34 acres of plants from around the world. They're primarily all wild collected, and the reason why that is special is because these plants are true to species. They're an important collection for researchers around the globe, and they're planted out naturalistically here in the garden so we can tell the story of plant origins and their important place in our lives. So James is going to tell you a little bit more about his work here at the garden and how this very special trip he took relates to his work here in the garden. And with that, I will turn it straight over to you, James. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you, Christine. So, yeah, thank you all so much for joining us today and hearing about this trip I did to Borneo back this past summer. So, let's get started. Hi, again, I'm James Fong. So, I'm a museum scientist here at the UC Botanical Garden. I work in the Asian and Australasian collections. But if you didn't know this already, I really like carnivorous plants. So, how did that journey start? So, I got started with growing carnivorous plants when I was about 10 years old. I got my first plant as a gift from my uncle Jose. And from there, my collection at home and my knowledge grew and grew, and got more involved in some of the plant societies like the Bay Area Carnivorous Plant Society. And for the longest time, I had this dream of going to Borneo because, as many people know, many of the coolest, in my opinion, Nepenthes grow on that island. Another fun fact about the first plant that I received, if you look at that tag, you can see a little logo in the top corner, and that plant came from the UC Botanical Garden. So full circle moment with working here and getting my start into plants from the UC Botanical Garden. So we are going to Borneo. Where is Borneo? Borneo is an island right here in Southeast Asia. It is the third largest island in the world and also has one of the oldest rainforests in the world. You can see that it's located right on the equator. And if you look at this map, you'll see a lot of the area is lowlands, but also a lot of higher elevations as well. So we are going to go to this corner here in Sabah. We start our trek at Mount Trusmadi down here, and then we head on over to Mount Tambuyukon and then Mount Kinabalu. So this whole area is protected and is part of the World Heritage Convention. And in order to organize this trip, we needed a lot of help. So we got this travel company called TYK Adventure Borneo to help us with the organization and figuring out guides and porters to make this adventure happen. Here's a rough itinerary that we had. So 2 days, 1 night at Mount Trusmadi, and then 4 days and 3 nights at Mount Tambuyukon, and then 2 days and 1 night at Mount Kinabalu. After talking with some carnivorous plant growers and other friends who have done these hikes, I had been told that we're basically doing harder to hard, hardest to hard in terms of level of difficulty of these treks. So 8 days and 7 nights, many people said that we were crazy. These are some of the Nepenthes species and natural hybrids we were looking forward to seeing or having the opportunity to see. The one that I was most looking forward to seeing is Nepenthes edwardsiana, and you'll understand why further on in this presentation. Let's learn a little bit about Nepenthes morphology for those of you who don't have much experience with these plants. You may know that they are carnivorous plants. They use a passive mechanism for catching insects. So the insects will will fall into the pitcher opening and not be able to come back out because they're at the bottom in these digestive fluids. Another thing to know about Nepenthes pitchers is they are leaves and not the flowers of the plants. So a lot of times people looking at Nepenthes will be like, oh, look at these flowers, look at these flowers. But in actuality, they are leaves. Another feature of Nepenthes is they have upper pitchers and lower pitchers. So the lower pitchers, the tendril attachment, uh, it occurs on, I forgot if I said lower. The lower pitchers tendril attachment is on the side where the wings are. And then if the tendril attachment comes from the opposite side of the wings, then it is an upper pitcher, and they could have very different morphologies. One way that I like to remember that the pitchers are leaves and not the flowers is that if you poke an Nepenthes pitcher enough, it'll say, "Leave me alone." Okay, they don't actually say that. Anyways, where are Nepenthes found? Nepenthes are found mainly in Southeast Asia, but they also occur in Northern Australia, India, the Seychelles, and even Madagascar. Okay, with all of that out of the way, let's get started. So here is our crew. On the left, we have Jian Souza. She is a Bay Area Carnivorous Plant Society member and is very into Nepenthes. Next to her is her partner, Craig. And then next to me is my partner, Denise. So here we are in the van getting ready to go. Look how happy and well rested we are. So we had to have breakfast first. And in this photo, you will see our main guide on the left. So that is Mike Mickey. He also goes by Tiger on the trail. And on the right is Tam Yao Kong. He is the one who operates TYK Adventure Borneo. And he was the one that we were communicating with to make sure all the arrangements for this trip were done. We also, at this restaurant, got some food to go for our lunch, which you'll see later. So, mountain number one, Mount Trusmadi. The summit of Mount Trusmadi is 8,668 feet. It is the second tallest mountain in Borneo and Malaysia. And we were starting at around 5,300 feet in elevation. So we had a little bit of a head start. We weren't starting at sea level. So here's a little video of the truck route that we were going. So we needed a four-wheel drive vehicle to get to the trailhead. And at the end of this, we found the biggest Nepenthes pitcher that I had ever seen. Okay, it's not a real Nepenthes pitcher. It's not alive, but we knew that this was a good sign and that we might see Nepenthes on the trail we were going on. Here we are with our guides Fresco and Linus, and this is at the entrance area to the park. And it's time to start hiking. Much of the beginning of this trail is a boardwalk. Jian had done this trail several years before this trip. And she said when she went on this trail, the Wooden slats didn't have this wire mesh over it, so it was super, super slippery. I will say the wire mesh helped, but we were still slipping around a little bit. It was also cool seeing some of the plants, the major trees were labeled. It was very difficult getting a photo of the leaves because the canopy was so high up. But some of the species that were here were species or from genera that I am familiar with. So Dacrycarpus is a genus of plant in the Australasia collection, and we also have Adenandra in the Asian collection. And we found our first Nepenthes. This is Nepenthes tentaculata, and it was quite variable. Uh, you can see some of the color variations here. And they were growing all over the place. On the left, you can see right underneath this boardwalk, there's a Nepenthes tentaculata, and you can also tell on the right-hand side that there were lots of stairs on this trail. Just to give you a little overview of the environment these were growing in. So these very mossy forests. Hard to tell temperature from a video, but it was fairly cool. Not the hot, humid conditions that many people think of as Nepenthes habitat. We also found Nepenthes zachariana. Unfortunately, we only found one plant during this entire hike, but it was great seeing a couple pictures. And we made it to our rest house. So thankfully, on this trail, we had a rest house to crash at. They had, you could kind of see in the back, it has bunk beds and they have a full-on kitchen, and we had our lunch there. So we had the option of either spending the rest of the day to rest or keep on going to see Nepenthes lowii. So of course, we pushed forward to see Nepenthes lowii. We were super stoked to see it, and you might notice the shape is a little funny. So why might that be? Well, these Nepenthes don't specialize in catching insects. They specialize in catching poop. So you could see some of the shrew droppings here. And what the plant ends up doing is they create nectar on the lid, and the shrews stand on the peristome or very reduced peristome and eat the nectar. And as they're eating, they will poop into these pitchers, and then as it rains, the poop ends up sliding down into the digestive fluid at the bottom, and it gets absorbed by the plant. So another cool uh, ecological thing that we found out here was Tayloria. This is a moss that specializes in growing on poop. So this moss is growing on the poop that's on the Nepenthes pitcher. Very cool layers there. We also found some Corybus orchids. Some people are very into these helmet orchids. And thanks to iNaturalist, I found out that these are called beautiful squirrels that we found out and about. So after that Nepenthes lowii mini visit, it was time to head back for dinner. They made some really good food. I believe the veggies were wild veggies that were collected and cooked. And of course, we had to do a little night hike since we had so much energy. We found some cool stick insects, but we had to cut the night hike short because we had to wake up at 2:45 a.m. to start our hike. So 2:45, we ate our breakfast, and by 3:30, we were heading up the trail. This is, I believe, the first time I had done a full-on night hike like this, And we found, you could see in this photo here, we found that trying to see the low-hanging branches and leaves while in the dark with a headlamp is very difficult. So lots of head bonks along the way. We also found some cool frogs and Nepenthes macrophylla. Yeah, Nepenthes macrophylla will also create natural hybrids with Nepenthes lowii to create Nepenthes trismadiensis. So that is the picture on the left. Unfortunately, the only trismadiensis that we saw was maybe 20 feet in the canopy, so we couldn't get a good photo of it. But one of the pictures had fallen, and we were able to see that old picture at least. Here's a couple more shots of Nepenthes macrophylla. You can see on the left, it's growing uh, in the same place as the Nepenthes lowii below it. And if you look on the right, you might notice something inside of the picture. So that is more shrew poop. Lots of Nepenthes eating poop. The plants were huge, so you could see from this photo that they're growing pretty high up in the canopy. You could see the vines or lianas that are formed by the Nepenthes. And here's
Oh
a
my
little
gosh, this one
video.
has a ton of shrew poop in it. Ooh, kind of gross. Yeah. There's lots of stuff. Oh, and it caught. Looks like it had good hunting as well. Lots of moths down there, butterflies. This is one happy and disgusting picture.
Yep, that's a great way to put it. Happy and disgusting. You'll see on the right a male Nepenthes macrophylla flower or inflorescence with many flowers. We also found some very cool rhododendrons up there. So Mount Trusmadi has a nickname. Some people call it Mount Trusmuddy. So you can see on the left some of the mud. And
Okay. 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 Hardest part. Just how far does it go up?
there were many times we were asking about how much further does it go up? And if it was the hardest part. But seeing these plants in nature was all totally worth it.
These lowii all over.
Yeah, so some of you might grow Nepenthes lowii, and if you do grow it, you might know that this plant is very, very, very slow to grow. So seeing these massive, massive plants made me realize that these plants in the wild are probably decades, if not hundreds of years old. And uh, yeah, it just makes it so much more amazing to be it. All right, we made it to the top. And here's the view that we had from up there. So off in the distance is Mount Kinabalu. What else did we find up here? We found this little mammal. So it's called a lesser, I don't know how to pronounce it, gymnure. Another common name for them is soft-furred hedgehogs. There were several of them running around, very cute. After spending a couple moments up there, it's time to head back down. So you could see some of the ladders we had to go up and down, and some of the slopes we went on. Mike here is an expert at these trails, and he went so fast up and down.
Oh my god!
I have no idea how he had so much energy.
That was
And
that
you could
Snickers bar there.
the Snickers bar apparently. But you could see us Denise and me lagging behind.
Yay, Denise!
We were exhausted. So once we got back to the rest house, I knocked out for probably 15 or 20 minutes. Thankfully, they had a nice warm soup to help recover from that trek. But yeah, I was totally exhausted after. And we still had to head back to the base after lunch. Here's another example of how muddy it was on Mount Trusmadi. And afterwards, we stayed at this very nice hotel with a view of Mount Kinabalu. This was in Kundasang, I believe. And yeah, I felt very weird being so muddy in this nice hotel. And after we had some dinner, this is our breakfast the following morning. We had to carbo load up because we were about to start the hardest hike. So this is Mount Tambuyukon. Even though it's the fourth tallest mountain, you can see that we were starting at 900 feet in elevation. So we had, what is that, like 7,500 feet in elevation gain to do in 4 days to do that and come back. To get to the base, we needed a four-wheel drive vehicle. And we began our hike. So right now we are at lowland elevation. So this is where you think of like hot, humid conditions.
Tambuyukon.
I'm already out of breath.
Already out of
The
breath.
first 30 minutes. My body's like.
Okay, so little content warning for those of you who are squeamish. This here is a terrestrial leech.
Yeah.
And there were many of them.
So here's a tiny little leech. As you can see, it's got suckers on both ends. Larger sucker in the back, so it can adhere to things. Sucker in the front, and that's how it moves. It kind of like, it's kind of cute, yeah. Displaces one sucker for another.
Okay, the terror is over. I found that taking videos was a good way to take a break from all the hiking. So we made it to Wula Camp that afternoon. We had a couple of cool plants and insects to see over there. And for our camping out here, it was recommended that we use hammocks. I think part of the reason is not a lot of flat ground to camp on with the tent. And also it keeps you off the ground from where the leeches are. Of course, right after we set up camp, it started pouring.
Camp. Storm just rolled in.
And for me, that night was the hardest night. I had some illness issues. And let's see, for some of our other travel companions, it was also very difficult. So this is Denise. That night, she got stung by a wasp, and apparently a leech had somehow gotten onto her, and she woke up with a bunch of blood in her sleeping bag. Also, sadly, Craig had to head back. He made the decision to save his energy for Mount Kinabalu, which is where a bunch of other Nepenthes species are. And since this one's the very hardest hike, he thought it'd make more sense for him to save his energy. So here we're at about, I believe, like 3,000 feet in elevation. And there's some river creek crossings. It was kind of fascinating. We had to worry more about leeches on the land than in the water. As a Californian, I am at least too. All right, rest, wash up at the river.
Okay, this is for you, Craig.
Sometimes things happen.
It got me!
So
How did it get there?
that was a leech that somehow got through Jian's gaiters and her socks and up her pants. So yeah, those leeches are intense. There's another shot of the forest we were in. It's kind of hard to tell from this photo, but there's a drop off, steep drop off, right in front of where Denise is at. But then we made it to Musang Camp. And here we are setting up. This was actually a really nice campsite here. Our guide here, Jinus, was very helpful in setting up our camp. And if you look at Jian, something I found out about her very quickly while on this trek is that she is the expert at setting up camp. She knows all the knots. She could set up camp fast. She knows where to hang all of her stuff to dry. For me, this was the first time using a hammock, so I got a lot of great pointers from watching Jian and from her teaching me. Here was our dinner that night. You could tell that it's actually not nighttime. It's still bright out, but we had a nice hearty dinner because the next day was summit day. And what I found out about summit days is you start early. So breakfast at 1 a.m. so that we can be off and hiking at 1:45. Also, a side note, I love fried noodles.
Everyone's awake.
Awake-ish.
Ish.
Here we go. While we were hiking, we encountered Nepenthes burbigiae. There were only a few plants that we saw, and it was actually quite interesting. Each plant only held one pitcher. I'm not sure if that's a seasonal thing or if that's typical for the species, but they were very pretty. This nice creamy white color on some of them.
Ooh, cool.
But we had to keep moving.
Holly bushes. Cool. Yeah.
Oh, tree climb.
Oh boy.
There's Denise.
There's something about this hike is suddenly it turned from a trail to a climb where we are just using our arms and legs and just grabbing on to whatever we could to haul ourselves up. But eventually we got to Nepenthes Edwardsiana territory. So I believe this was at around 8,000 feet in elevation. But we had to keep moving because we had to make it to the summit. Here's a tarantula that was hiding out in a little hole in a branch. How fun.
Okay, there we go.
Careful, there's like a branch here that's gonna stab me.
We got stabbed by many branches.
You can't tell, there's like a 6-7 foot wall right here.
We also encountered Utricularia. We believe it was Stratula, but yeah, very unexpected to find here. Or at least I didn't expect to find it. We kept climbing, and you could kind of get a sense of how steep it is.
Making our way up the mountain, vertical cliff.
And along with having to climb up, we had to climb across. So over here, the ground is held together just by roots. So lots of holes underneath these mossy, slippery roots to fall into. So we have to be very careful there. but we started making it to the top. At this point in time,
right, here comes Gian to the top of Mount Tambuyukon.
Oh my goodness.
It's
beautiful.
Beautiful.
So at this point, Denise's ankle was hurting, so she decided to stop here and start slowly making her way back down as to not aggravate her foot too much because we still had another mountain to go after. Here's another photo of the view. And this was a genus I wasn't expecting to see over here. This is a Leptospermum. Many people may know it as being a Australian plant or New Zealand plant, but yeah, it was very cool seeing it at the higher elevations on this mountain. We also found Nepenthes raja. So you could see that scalloped peristome, and it is quite large. This is one of the largest Nepenthes species, and especially by volume, I believe it could hold like more than 2 liters of liquid in the pitchers. And there's a photo of the plant itself. It's kind of growing amongst all of this brush. It tended to be more terrestrial than epiphytic. And there's an unopened pitcher on the left and a open pitcher on the right. We also found Nepenthes villosa up there. So Nepenthes villosa, there's a Mount Tambuyukon form and a Mount Kinabalu form. So this is the Tambuyukon form. It's a little more elongated. But if you look at the tendrils on these, you can't even see where the tendril attaches to the rest of the plant, but there must have been like 2 foot long tendrils at least. And here's another villosa. It's quite variable, so this is a more yellow form of the species. We also found this cool Aureliaceae at the summit. And speaking of summit, we made it to the summit. So Jan and I made it, and here's the view. This time it's Mount Kinabalu from the other side of the mountain. But of course, the hike wasn't done yet because we were told that there is Drosera to be found. So we hiked for another maybe kilometer to get to this bog. Over here we found Drosera ultramathica. So it's this patch was, I don't know, maybe, I don't know, not a large patch, a couple hundred square feet maybe, but very cool to find. You could see some of these sticky glandular tentacles. And also in this area was a bunch of Nepenthes raja. So it was interesting. The Nepenthes raja in this area, they were almost all female plants. Here you can see some of the aquatic life living within the pitchers, and Jan holding one of those massive, massive pitchers. Thought this was a funny
All right,
photo.
we found one male plant doing work out here.
Spreading its genes far and wide.
One male, and he's got a bunch of pictures too. Very happy here.
Yeah, so that was the only male out of probably over a dozen plants. Everything else was flowering female. I'm not quite sure why that is, but very, very cool. All right, so time to head back down. So now that the light was out, the sun was out, it was time to take some photos. Kind of funny with this situation, when we were at the summit of the mountain, some other folks that were coming up said that someone from our group was injured. So I was immediately was like, oh no, something happened. I got to start rushing down. So I was hustling down. I was running down the mountain, and I actually ended up breaking my one of my hiking poles while running down. But I got to take some nice breaks to take photos of Nepenthes. And it was kind of cool being able to run down this slope, and you could see kind of towards the right there's a Nepenthes edwardsiana picture hanging over the path. So I actually, while I was running, wasn't paying attention and uh, hit my head on one of those pictures and got the fluid all over my head. And when I looked up, I was like, "Oh yeah, I'm in this world of Nepenthes. This is so cool." And yeah, look at the teeth on the peristomes of these Nepenthes, and the pictures were massive. And I also got to take some photos of the Nepenthes burbigiae. So the pictures were bigger than I expected. And actually, for me, was probably the plant that I liked the most in terms of like, didn't expect to like the most. We also found more Corybus. And actually, the Corybus were found at our campsite. So we made it back, all exhausted but intact. Thankfully, Denise was all in good shape. And then it was time for bed. We actually had an early dinner, and this was our breakfast before we made the rest of the trip down. Here we go. And now we're just excited to be going back and reunited with Craig. All right, so once we made it to the bottom, we took a little side excursion to this place that has a bunch of Rafflesia. So at this location, they have two species, and the one that we saw was Rafflesia princei. This is the smaller of the two species. The flower, as you could see from this, uh, for princei, could get up to 65 centimeters. For the Keithii, could grow to be a whole meter across. So giant flowers. We were a little later on to get to this, so the flower wasn't quite as smelly as it could be. After that, we made it to Pouring Hot Springs. So Pouring Hot Springs, as the name suggests, has hot springs, and if we had finished our hike a little bit earlier, we would have been able to soak in the hot springs to ease our aching joints and muscles, but we were too late. So we just had a nice place to stay. Here's some of our nasty clothes at the end of the Tambuyukon hike. Jan was actually very smart and brought a set of clothes for each mountain. We brought one, so it was kind of gross putting on these used clothes for every hike. But here's our dinner. Very nice, fancy dinner. So the following day, we had to stop by the pharmacy. We had burned through all of the ibuprofen we had brought. We ended up needing to get more altitude sickness pills because the next mountain was going to be 13,435 feet in elevation. So this is the tallest mountain in Borneo and Malaysia. We were going to be starting at about 6,100 feet. So if you do the math, that is a little over 7,000 feet of elevation gain um, in 2 days. Here we are with the mountain. And I thought this was crazy. They have a annual climathon where people race to the top of the mountain and back. And some people finish in like less than 4 hours to do the whole thing. That's insane. Right. One of the first plants that we saw and noticed was this Impatiens kinabaluensis. Very, very pretty, along with Hedychium, and of course, Nepenthes. What just happened? Tentaculata. Uh, and it's quite variable, as mentioned before. some cool rhododendrons and tree ferns and stairs. Turns out, and we've been warned, that Mount Kinabalu is basically just a ton of stairs. Oh yeah, some cool orchids, this Sertandra, and more stairs. This was a genus I'd never heard of, Hediotis. And then this other cool rhododendron. And you can see that this trek was a lot more popular than any of the other ones we had been on. With the other two mountains, we were nearly the only ones on the mountain. Over here, there must have been, I don't know, maybe up to 100 people on the trek, maybe more. But we got to see some cool carnivorous plants. So this here is another Nepenthes villosa. And we got to see Nepenthes kinabaluensis. So that's a natural hybrid between Nepenthes raja and villosa. And let's see, it looks like that Nepenthes got a earwig or something. And you could kind of tell that the shape is a little different from the Tambuyukon form of Nepenthes villosa. Okay, so as we gained elevation, the the landscape started to change. You could see it's a lot less canopy, more sclerophyllous vegetation. Got to throw in more villosa photos. And we found some cool big lycopodiums and another species that, or genus that we have here in the garden. So this is Dacrydium gibbsii. At the garden, we have Dacrydium cupressinum in the Australasia collection. There's a pentaphragma. Oh, also in the Australasia collection, we have Phyllocladus. That was very unexpected to see. And here's some more photos of the Nepenthes kinabaluensis. So these were nearly always growing terrestrially. In the photo on the right, you can see another kinabaluensis picture, I believe, on the back right-hand side. More villosa and some male flowers on Nepenthes villosa. Yeah, they were growing some of them right along the path. So here's a Nepenthes villosa picture, and on the left you can see the path where hundreds of people go across every day. And it started getting windy. So up towards the top, a lot fewer trees. And oh yeah, you could tell it's getting a little bit colder too. And up here we found magnolias and shimas. So those are some genera of plants that we have that we think of as being like, at least I think of as being from like more Asian areas. So very cool. Also rubus and photinia. An acrothamnus, which we have in the Australasia collection. Okay, so we made it to the rest house. This is at about almost 11,000 feet. And on the right, you can see our dorm situation. And here's their big cafeteria. So we had a nice buffet dinner to try and energize ourselves because the next day we had to start at 2 a.m. So if you look on the right, you can see that breakfast is at 7:30, but this buffet supper is from 2 a.m. to 3:30 a.m. That night was a little bit rough for myself and some other people on our team. So Jan and Craig decided to hang back. By this point in time, we had actually seen all the Nepenthes that we were going to see. The rest was just to see if you could make it to the summit. I had a little bit left in me, so I said, "Screw it, let me try heading up." And Denise was actually feeling pretty good. So 2 a.m. breakfast and 2:30 a.m. hike to the summit. You can see that there's
Doing great.
a lot fewer trees and plants and a lot more giant rocks to
Very
climb.
good.
But from here you can see Lowe's Peak. This is the highest point on Mount Kinabalu. And we made it. So you can see us with our big headlamps, and you might notice that we're wearing these puffers too. So the temperature up there, I believe, was in the roughly mid 30s, which is definitely not what you would think of as being in the tropics. But once you get to elevation, things cool down quite a bit. Found some other cool plant species up there that we haven't seen on the rest of our hike. And then, of course, time to head down. So some beautiful views from the top. You can see on the right-hand side that it's quite steep. Um, yeah, it was actually kind of nice going up in the dark because you couldn't tell how steep things were, quite the same as you can when it's light out. Here's a couple more species we found now that it's a little lighter. Cool podocarpus as well. All right, so now we head to the rest house, have a quick bite to eat, try and recover as best as we can, and finish off our trip. So on the way back down, I got a couple more photos of Sertandra and rhododendrons. And of course, more Nepenthes tentaculata. And, it was cool seeing this Blechnum. It had a metallic-y color. It looked almost fake. And on the way up and the way down, we saw people carrying all of this equipment. And it's amazing what people can do. So you can see on the left, this person's carrying probably like a, I don't know, 8 foot metal structure on his back. And yeah, I mean, the only way to get things up and down is to carry them. So it was cool seeing all these superhumans carrying uh, all of this material up and down uh, to the rest house. All right, we made it back. It was nice seeing that little message at the bottom saying you are successful climbers. We were so destroyed by the end of this 8 day trek. It definitely taught me a lesson to include rest days between mountains. Um, yeah, but thankfully everyone made it back down safely. We got to see Nepenthes in the wild. We were able to mostly do all of the mountains. Um, oh, I also wanted to include some stats. So here's some stats. We did about or over 18,250 feet in elevation gain over 37 miles. We had 5 full-on leech bites. We had several others that bit and we were able to get off. Um, many ibuprofen pills taken, bunch of slips, a bunch of head bonks. Um, we had several wasp stings and ankle tweaks. And unfortunately, I was the only one that, or I guess fortunately, I was the only one that broke a trekking pole. And I have another little bonus story for those of you who want to stick around. So, uh, before the Borneo trek, Denise and I went to visit family over in Singapore. So we went to the Flower Dome on, I believe, the second or third day of our visit. And it was super cool. It holds the Guinness World Record for the largest glass greenhouse in the world. And I found it fascinating being in the tropics and going to a greenhouse there because if you look at the vegetation, they're growing all these plants that we grow outside here in California. So the sections they have under glass are a South America section, an Australian section, a South African section. They even have a California section, which is wild to see. Um, but we partly went to do this tour. So We joined this tour. It was for the UC Berkeley Cal Alumni Association that my uncle's a part of. And part of this tour was listening to a couple speakers. One of them was this person. Some of you might recognize him. He is the chancellor of UC Berkeley, and it just so happened that we were at the Flower Dome in Singapore at the same time. Another person that has connections to UC Berkeley and the garden was Dr. Sean Lum. So he is a professor over at Nanyang Technological University in Singapore, and he's a botany professor. Turns out that he studied botany at UC Berkeley years ago, and he was actually a student of our director at the UC Botanical Garden, Lou Feldman. So it was really cool listening and sharing some stories with Sean. All right, that concludes my presentation. This was actually a photo taken at the beginning of our trip, back when we were all energetic and had big smiles on our faces before we got all dirty. Um, but yeah, it was a really amazing experience. This is a trip that I'd wanted to do for over 20 years now, and it was so great to make it happen. It was also great to see representatives of plants that we grow here at the garden over in the wild. And I'd like to thank our guides and our porters for making it happen. Mike was an amazing guide. All of the food that we had while camping was brought and prepared by Mike. He got to know that I really liked fried noodles, so that's why many of the dishes, part of the reason why many of the dishes had fried noodles in it. And then I'd also like to thank Tam Yao Kong. He was instrumental in making this trip happen. I had actually found out through conversations that he was he's played a big part in making ecotourism in Borneo more and more popular. So he runs several tours doing both nature things and historical tours. And yeah, this was an amazing group to go with. And I'm already starting to think of how we can make another trip like this happen again. So thank you for listening. I'm happy to take questions. It looks like we still have a bit of time.
Thank you, James, so much. That was probably one of the most immersive presentations we've ever had. That was incredible. The video footage had us there with you. That was incredible. And I cannot believe what you did physically. I'm just blown away. But those were incredible photographs and videos, and thank you so much. As Mary noted in chat, if there are a few questions, we might be able to ask a few. I have one here. Are the plants protected in Borneo? How endangered are they?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, all of the sites that we visited are protected national parks. So, yes, very protected. Uh, yeah, the Nepenthes themselves are endangered. There's CITES. I think most of them are CITES two, one or two. But yeah, very protected sites. That being said, it should be noted that we did see potential evidence of poaching. So
Mm-hmm.
sometimes they will cut the vines of the plants and then dig up the plant from the ground to make it easier to transport. So that's very disappointing. But also, something that should be noted is that um, doing these trips helps contribute to the local economy, and hiring porters and guides also uh, helps create well-paying jobs for the people who live there, and gives them an additional reason to make sure these plants stay protected.
Great. I have another question about what kind of inspiration might you have taken from the trip that you'll apply to the UC Botanical Garden?
Yeah, yeah. So, for example, seeing a lot of the genera represented there, growing out in the wild and seeing like, okay, these are the groupings of plants that might occur together, was very informative. And then also being out in the environment and like, yeah, once we got to certain elevations, the temperatures were very similar to the temperatures that we have here in the Bay Area. So kind of thinking about the elevations we were at, and that kind of helps with decisions on what plants we can receive for our collection and potentially grow out and have visited by the public and used by researchers and educators.
Amazing. And I feel embarrassed that this is a question from me, but do we have Nepenthes growing outside or only in our glass houses?
So right now they are only in our glass houses, but something that I've been thinking about is how might we be able to incorporate some of these species? And then again, being at these elevations and feeling it firsthand, getting a sense of, okay, if we have a plant with data saying that it is from 7, 8,000, 9,000 feet in elevation, maybe that means it's more likely to succeed out here in the outdoor collections at the garden.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much. This was so informative, and just love seeing these really unusual plants in their natural habitat, making them real for us. And I encourage all of you to come visit the garden now and look for these plants growing here at the garden. And traveling our mini world of plants here at the UC Botanical Garden. So thank you so much, and we hope to see you at the next program. Thanks, James.
Yeah, thank you all so much.